Welcome to Redefining Real Estate. I'm Rylan.
And I'm Morgan. Expect a mix of education, humor, and authentic conversation as we explore all things real estate.
Let's jump into today's episode.
All right, guys, today we're going to dive into what happens after you tell us, I want this house. Obviously, the whole time we're looking at houses with you guys, doing showings, we're kind of just dreaming in this hypothetical land. Like, yes, I love this house. I love these things about it. So we're going to go over, what does that process look like? What should you expect? And what our role is throughout the entire process until you actually get the keys and move in.
Yeah, I think the big thing is some people don't know what the actual offer process really looks like. They don't know they just know there's a bunch of documents and you kind of just sign something, right? They're like, oh yeah, this is the one. So now you kind of have this big checklist to go through, obviously making sure that you're pre-qualified for the loan and
Right.
things like that. The house checks all the boxes, but yeah, the actual next step, I guess, would be to ensure that's done and then start the offer. A lot of documents in there, a lot of things to learn and teach, but if you're an agent who takes their job seriously, it's pretty easy to explain those documents to your client. Filling all that out, making sure the terms are, good for your client and what they need, whatever circumstance that may be. But yeah, after the initial offer is sent, what happens next?
Well, I think it is important to touch on something that we do, which I don't know if a lot of other groups in our area do this, is we try to have what we call an offer strategy session.
Yes.
So that just means, if this is something you're very new to and you would like to sit down together and go through the offer paperwork paragraph by paragraph. I try to do this with all of my clients unless they explicitly tell me no, I'm good, I get
Right.
it. So we go through all of the pieces of the offer so you fully understand the paperwork, and also so you understand again what our role is in this, because a lot of people don't understand we can write up this paperwork, but what does it mean?
Right.
And ultimately our job is to make sure that you guys are protected as buyers. There are so many different timelines in the contract that allow you to terminate the deal and get your earnest money deposit back. And so that's kind of the point of doing the offer strategy session, is to say hey, we have these timelines. If something were to happen, something changes, you have these opportunities to get your deposit back and get out of this deal.
Right. Yeah, and that's huge. The earnest money, typically 1%. So you could be talking a couple grand, who knows what it may be.
Right.
Definitely don't want to just throw that money around without having it be used properly. You don't really want to put that up for risk if you don't have to. So if that means making your option period a little bit longer and that's going to be best for you given the calendar day, then maybe that's just going to be the way to go. But definitely something big to make sure that everyone's on the same page with.
Yeah, and if your agent is experienced, they will tell you other timelines besides the option period that can be utilized for terminating the contract in a variety of different ways. So it's literally like a strategy session for that reason, so you fully understand your options. But after you get through that offer strategy session and your agent sends over the offer, you get it accepted, then at that point, whenever everyone has been communicated to that both parties have signed, we're all in agreement, that starts the timeline of when everything goes off of, right? So
Yes.
your option period starts. You have to turn in your earnest money deposit and option fee within 3 days to the title company. So talk a little bit more about the option period. What can people expect? The earnest money deposit, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of people expect chaos at some point in this journey. You mentioned being more in dreamland, kind of some hypotheticals when you're looking for homes, seeing if it's going to be match your style of living, all those things. And then they're kind of waiting for the jump scares, I think that would probably be best described as the first week of going under contract. There's a lot going on, title companies reaching out, lenders reaching out, we're scheduling inspections, all of those things. You have to go drop off that check within the first 3 days. It could be a little chaotic if you go under contract on a Saturday or something. So kind of difficult, but it's all very manageable if you understand, if you can expect that.
Right.
And that the title company's going to be reaching out, your lender's going to need things from you. I think understanding that would probably be the easiest way to go into it versus your realtor just sending the paperwork and saying, all right, we're good to go. Like, we'll start doing something. And then all of a sudden your phone is just blowing up. So
Yeah.
I think it's very good to have the offer strategy session just because you can kind of give them like a rundown of what to expect the next 30, 45 days, however many it may be. But yeah, like the first week, it's going to be a lot. But
Yeah, and I try to tell my clients this to expect it. It's like from the first time we meet, like, hey, this first week after we get the offer accepted, it is a lot. It can be very overwhelming for people, especially if you don't have an office job where you have access to your computer, or if you do have an office job and from the time that you get there, you're like, going 100 miles an hour and you're not stopping,
Right.
Until the end of the day. Because they're going to be asking for a lot of documents. The title company will be sending emails just updating everyone on the file. And then us as your realtor, like you mentioned, scheduling inspections and then actually going to inspections.
right.
Then going through the reports from the inspections, doing negotiating. That part I think is probably the most overwhelming, or at
Yeah.
least for my clients it has been in the past. Just because they're looking for direction and they're like, I have life happening and now I have to like figure this other stuff out. Like,
Right.
what do I do?
For sure. And that's such like kind of like an unsettling time for people because if it's like their first time buying a home and they've been doing this for years to plan to like finally purchase a home and they have all this stuff going on and then they find out that there's like some water damage somewhere, like that can be huge. That can be a big stressor. And like it's kind of hard because you don't want to like kill the deal, but like you can if you want to. And it's a lot. So it's definitely a lot. I had a guy a couple months back, get very overwhelmed with something like that. He was like, this is a lot. There's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if I can keep going forward with this home. Like, there's some repairs that need to be done. The seller's not really willing to do them. Like, I don't know. There's a lot going on, and I think I'm just going to take some time off from this home buying thing for now. And in hindsight, I probably could have prepared him a lot better for that situation. The repairs that were needed, I didn't think were going to be like deal killers by any means, but unfortunately they were, and it happens. But yeah, it's definitely can be overwhelming. But as long as you're prepared for it, I think it can be a little bit more like manageable to take on.
Yeah, well, I think that as far as people's like risk tolerance, it varies wildly, right?
For
Like,
sure.
if you're someone who is handy and you're okay with like needing to invest in your house with repairs over time, then yeah, like let's look at old houses. Let's look
Right.
at whatever you want. But if you're someone who is like afraid of the risk or you don't want to have these unexpected expenses, you should probably stay looking at newer construction because
Right.
the process there, while it's still overwhelming, it's not in the same way. It's
Correct.
a little bit differently. And I know you've had a client recently that's kind of been dealing with that, right?
Yes, yeah, we do. We have inspections today, so it's kind of those inspections versus like a resale home. It's like you look forward to these inspections because again, you can just give like a punch list and they can just run through it. You're like looking for things to fix,
Right.
versus like hoping there's nothing to fix. But yeah, it's a little bit different of a vibe to it, but she's definitely looking forward to it.
Right. Well, I know you mentioned that even though I guess new construction, this process is easier with inspections. Like the builder has still been sending documents for her to sign, like without saying
Yes,
anything, not
yes,
explaining them,
yes.
just like sending a bunch of stuff over. And she's like, what is this? What am I supposed to
Yes.
do with these things?
She is very overwhelmed, which I told her like I can see why. We're having some issues with documents being sent to all parties of the transaction. A lot of things are just going straight to her as a DocuSign to just sign it, And she opens it, and obviously, like, there's all this information. It can be multiple page documents. All of her info's on there, and there's no like direction. There's no guidance. There's no like explanations for anything. And she's trying to send it to me, but like I don't really have access to it because it's like through her thing, and it's a lot. And we're figuring it out together. And she's definitely not. She feels alone, and she'll tell me that. I'm like, no, like I'm talking to them as we speak. Like we're figuring this out, and we're working as a team through it because, I mean, you have to. There's just so much going on. You can't really be on two different pages,
Right, and it is annoying that they're not copying you in on the
And
stuff they're
yes.
sending you. But I
Yes.
know that can be somewhat common with, these larger, like, nationwide builders.
Correct.
They're not as detail-oriented with their process.
Yes, and she understands that too because we've talked about it, and she understands that they're supposed to be sending everything. So whenever they do that, she just replies with, please loop in, my realtor and transaction coordinator, as we've previously discussed multiple times. So like, she's definitely on it, and I love that about her. But yeah, we're getting through it. Inspections are gonna be good today. It's gonna be positive. So we'll do that, and we'll keep on trucking along.
Yeah, but with inspections, I think a lot of people don't realize that's one of the most pivotal times for us to be able to negotiate.
For sure.
Depending on what ends up coming up, because we can choose to release those, reports to the seller to talk about things that specifically need to be repaired.
Yeah.
But I think expectations again are really important here. If you're looking at a home that is not brand new or hasn't been built within the last 5 to 10 years, you really cannot expect the home to have a clear inspection report, right? Because they're going to talk about things that aren't up to code. They're going to talk about things that are deficient, health and safety hazards.
Yes.
And it's all about prioritizing those items that come up and figuring out, okay, what is something that would be an absolute concern before I move in that I want to try to get money for, that I want to try to get the seller to repair, or have a mixture of both.
Right. Yeah, I had inspections last week, and it was great. The home was built in 2015, so there wasn't really anything crazy going on with it. There was a few things like, pipe insulation that weren't all the way out to the unit, like those locking cap things, the float valves, and the emergency
that they put
drains.
on every single
Yes, there was some spray in insulation on the drain pan, so that could have clogged and caused it to overflow. So things that aren't going to ruin the home, but also preventative maintenance, and we actually negotiated all of those things be completed per my client's request after multiple conversations, and the sellers agreed to it. They're just gonna cut him a check at closing for it, but so kind of interesting. Those are little things that typically the buyer would kind of be okay with doing, but he was like, just see if we can do that. We're within our option period, and this is the time to negotiate. So that's what we did, and everything worked out. So
yeah, the worst thing they can say is no, right? So.
Correct. Yeah, they can tell us no, and honestly, my client is more than capable of doing all that himself, and he was like, nah, whatever. So he just wanted to see if they would be willing to do it, and they were, and now he's, having repairs done.
Right. So beyond inspections, once that's done, we negotiate on any repairs or concessions that need to be put into the contract. And then really after that, it calms down a bit, at least from the negotiation side, and kind of the emotions of learning about the house and making sure, that everybody knows we're on the same page, we're in agreement of what needs to be done before closing. And then it's really more of, waiting for the title company to do their job, making sure you're staying in contact with your lender and sending them any other documents that they need.
Right.
And then, of course, staying in contact with us to make sure that any documents from the title company or the lender get taken care of.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a weird time, I feel like, because, again, you're used to the hypothetical dreamland, absolute chaos, and then it's the clouds reveal the sun. It's it's weird. Where's the, whatever more they're going to throw at you? What's going on? It feels like there's something wrong. But, again, that's to be expected. It's supposed to be kind of calm after your option period's over, all the inspections are done, which obviously comes up during the offer strategy session, but may not be really talked about until afterwards. But it's a good time because that you're probably gonna get the home. It's a lot more of a settled negotiation time. So I kind of like that period because it's the fun stuff is coming up, and all the really hard things you have to overcome is kind of over with. But it's a unique time.
It definitely is, and I think that the fact that this time period is longer than the negotiations and the option period, I think it does create expectations with our buyers where they start to think oh, well, most of your work is done here, you're good to go. It's great working with you. See you at closing, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And that would be amazing if that was the case.
I would love to just kind of put my feet up one day.
Right.
That would be cool.
Right. And sometimes that is the case with transactions, but the reason that you use a realtor is for the times where it's not. And because we are doing this every day, we know what to look out for.
Right.
And, for example, I had a buyer right before the end of the year It was a cash deal, so there was no lender involved. We got through the option period, negotiated everything, and we were just kind of waiting. And then we received a copy of the survey and the title commitment. And on the title commitment from University Title, they basically do this commitment and tell you the policy that they're going to provide for the home in the case that in the future there are issues with the title, right? With the change of ownership. So they had parts in there where they were not going to cover certain things based on the survey.
Oh.
And this was a house that was built in, 1980s, Southwood Valley area. And so my client was like, okay, so what does this mean for me? Like, are they saying they're not going to cover this? Or like now I have to make changes to the house? Or like what? I don't understand.
Right.
And so we were able to actually discuss those issues. I can tell them the implications. And not only that, but I reached out to the listing agent to run it by her because she was an experienced agent that's been doing this for probably 20, 30 years. And we ended up getting an email from one of the city council members at City of College Station to like just give him additional peace of mind, like, hey, just saying like there's no changes that need to be done on this property. You're good to go. So we had literal like something in writing stating that he didn't have to worry about his concerns. Because basically what happened is when the neighborhood was being developed way back then, the city had different restrictions on like setback lines. And so the neighborhood had like a deed restricted setback line, and then the city had one. And there was an addition on the house that was between those two. So it was within the city lines, but it was outside of the deed restricted lines that were put in place, 50 years ago. So
that's tricky.
Yeah, that's why there was some concern, and that's why you use a realtor, so we can get you the information you need and make sure that you don't have any problems moving forward.
Yes.
Because it's not all about like what's happening right now.
Yeah, especially the very end, like those settlement statements. I'm sure you remember that deal that we did a little while back.
Yeah, that was something.
Oh, story, good times. Things like that, that just come across right before the end. And I mean, that whole thing, there was a lot going on with that settlement statement.
Yeah. And so by the way, the settlement statement is the document you receive right before closing that lines out all of your expenses for both buyer and seller. And it lines out like your cash to close amount or how much your seller is getting back.
Yes. Wasn't like the commission like 9% for the settlement or something like
was,
wild?
It was all messed up, and the title company didn't release that document until the morning of closing, and my sellers were not local. They were distance sellers, and so they had a mobile notary going out, and we didn't get a chance to double check that until the notary got there that morning.
Yes.
They were in a different time zone also.
Awesome.
So yeah, it was crazy, but luckily we are 2 doors down from our title company, so I literally just like walked over there and said, hey, there's this issue, let's fix it, and they got it taken care of.
I remember I was looking at it like on my computer over there, and I was like looking at it, I was like, oh, and like I got it fixed like right before we closed, because I got the updated, accurate one whenever I got there, and because we were looking at it, because like you said, like it was released like that morning, and we had team photos that morning. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And so like I kind of just glanced through it. I didn't look at the very bottom of it. And then whenever we got to the title company, I was looking over. I was like, whoa, like what's all this? And so they fixed it, gave it to me. We signed all the docs. Like we closed. I came back and I gave that one to you. I was like, hey, here's the updated one.
Yeah.
And all I remember was you grabbed it and you go, I got to go somewhere. Just went out. And I was like, go get them. But yeah, it was interesting. And like, again, that's why you use someone that knows what those documents are. Maybe if another seller out there wasn't being represented, or maybe just had some random person they found that they didn't really trust or know. I mean, that could have been really bad.
Yeah, well, obviously you want to trust the title company, and
Right.
typically they get all the numbers right, but they were in the process of training new people, and
Yes.
this was like the Friday before Thanksgiving, so
Everybody was trying to close.
yeah, they had like double bookings for every single hour, so it was just like a crazy time. And yeah, to your point, that's why you should have representation, because you don't know what can happen. And even with new construction, have you experienced having to step in for your client yet, or what has your experience been with helping people that are in new construction?
Yeah, we had to do it the other day. So they were offering a lower interest rate and cash back at closing, and we got all of the title commitment, all like the loan docs, and none of that was on there. And that was pretty frustrating because that was the only reason we used their lender. And like we already had a pre-qual letter from a different lender, we already set up there, and to not see any of that on there was wild, because that was the whole point of all of this. So I did have to step in with that and be like, hey, like, client just sent me this, like, what's going on? Like, y'all are offering this, this, and this. Like, here's where we signed for it, all those things. Like, here's your literal ad that you're promoting this with. So anyways, they updated it. They apologized. It was something within their systems that just got messed up. But again, like, had your client like maybe not looked at it, or had I not been looking at it, like that, I mean, that would have been horrible. Like, it's like interest rates from a 4.99 to like 7 plus.
Yeah,
like,
that's a huge
like
difference.
that's like we're talking thousands of dollar difference. And my client needs the 2% cash back at closing, and that wasn't on there either. So anyways, it's just one of those things you just have to be aware of. That not everything that comes out is going to be perfect. No matter how put together and professional it may look. But the important thing is that we were able to catch it in that time and fix it. And we're still moving along. Just kind of like the deal that we did a while back. Like, we were able to catch it and fix it, and the deal still went through. So it can be a little stressful sometimes, but again, like that's our job to handle those things.
Right. And I think it's important to know, like, you knew what to expect, what the norm is, because again, like, we work in this industry every day.
Right.
And I think that's something else that for new construction, people think that once we have the offer written, once it gets accepted by the builder, then like, hey, we're good to go. We just do
Right.
inspections and then close. But in reality, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, like a lot of things.
Lots of things.
I remember this was a couple of years ago, I think 2 years ago. I had a client purchasing a home in Pleasant Hill over in Bryan.
Yeah.
And they had some concerns about some of the workmanship on the house because we went under contract, I want to say like 4 or 5 months before it was completed. So I think it was like just a slab and maybe like
some
the
framing
walls.
or something. Yeah.
So as it was getting built, there are kind of like levels to how complete it gets and like when you actually want to go and look at
Like
what
stages,
needs to be done.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So different
yes.
stages of like, okay, it makes sense to like tell them stuff.
Right.
But these clients, they were purchasing new. They really didn't want to have anything to worry about because they work a lot. And so like having to deal with maintenance on a house was the last thing they wanted to think about. So I went out and like we did the framing inspection, which I always recommend to do as many inspections as you can, but we got that done. And then in between that and like the final inspection that you do, usually around like blue tape walkthrough time, I went out and did like my own, I'm not an inspector, right? But I went out and took pictures of cosmetic defects that needed to be addressed because we were on a timeline for the closing because my clients had a lease that was ending.
Oh, okay, got you.
So they needed to make
Yeah,
that
you didn't have
move.
any time for delays.
Yes, no
Gotcha.
time for delays. So I want to say it was like a month or two before closing. I went out, I took pictures, I documented the area of like where these things were at. For
Right.
example, like there were some stones in the front entry that were cracked or that the grout was weird on.
Gotcha.
And in the garage, like the concrete that they had done on the side of it was all cracked and stuff.
Kind of flaky or?
Yeah, it was flaky because this is just like the sidewall, right?
Yes.
That they do right underneath the drywall. And so it's like things like that where like if we can get this house to be in as perfect as condition as possible, let's try to do that.
Right.
And unfortunately, you not only have to be someone who's like the squeaky wheel, right? Because my clients had already talked to the builder about this and nothing was being done.
Yep.
But I feel like when you have a realtor, you're actually taken more seriously because they know like, well, this person is like licensed, like they know what they're doing.
Right. They've seen this before. They're going to call us on our BS. Right?
Yes, exactly. Otherwise, you might be in a situation where you don't know what's supposed to happen. Like, you're just going along with the builder thinking, oh, well, they're going to take care of everything. Like, this is new construction.
Yeah, they keep saying we're on track to close.
Yeah, when in reality, it's like, okay, well, I went by the house and we're nowhere near being close to done. And your lease ends in 2 months. So let's make sure this is on track.
Isn't that scary? Like, that's scary to me to think that there's people that are like thinking that you can just go out there and they're just going to be, perfect, right?
I think that's just optimism, right? Of
right.
This company is saying that they're going to do this, so I'm going to trust them.
Yeah, and it should be that way, right? But
it should, if only it were that way.
The world needs squeaky wheels, though.
Yes, the world does need squeaky wheels. But yeah, so that's kind of like the scariness, I guess, the risk that you may encounter during that process. And then, like we talked about, like after negotiations of that first week, lender is reaching out to you to get updated bank statements, any other docs that they need, which, by the way, depending on what lender you use, that can also be crazy because I had a client use Navy Federal not too long ago, and we had a super long closing timeline, 45 days. The clients themselves and me asked before we even went under contract, do you need any other docs from us? Do you have everything you need? They're like, yeah, we're good. And then the week before closing, they're like, hold on, we might not be able to close.
Oh.
And mind you, like the sellers are contingent on another like property. So like if we don't close that day, which I think this was like right before Thanksgiving or right before Christmas.
Yes.
If we didn't close that day, like it was going to screw up all of their plans. So yeah, again, not every lender is built the same. Because basically what happens is like, you have this loan officer and they take your initial docs, their team takes your initial docs, and they don't usually send it to their underwriters, who are the ones who are actually like going line by line, making sure that everything is, what it needs to be based on the rules and regulations that they have to abide by. So the loan officer will take in your information initially, right? Have you ever had a client have issues with their lender, or have you been lucky so far?
I want to say I've been lucky so far, but it's also, I trust the lender that we've been using.
So you've been getting them in touch with the lender that we've worked with before and that we trust.
Yes, the one that the team's been using for a long time.
Yeah.
The ones that I've, recently built a relationship with, and I definitely it's all been smooth so far. That one seller finance deal was a little different, but it's been good so far. I haven't had anything go super sideways on like the financing side of it. This new construction home we're doing today, that's been a little tricky. Like I mentioned, they didn't like all their kind of docs were weird and kind of out of order, but other than that, no. Typically, people that I talk to, they're looking for a recommendation. They don't already have someone that they want to use. So that's kind of been my experience. But has there been anything recently that's happened like that other than that one?
No, nothing recent. I feel like when I first started, like closer to COVID, a lot more people were spending more time at home, working from home, and so they had more time to do their own research.
They're just deep diving for days.
Oh yeah, they're deep diving, or they're using Rocket Mortgage. So, and it's like, it's okay if you are a well-qualified buyer, but the issue is that most first-time home buyers may have this perception of like, I make good money, I was able to get qualified for this vehicle, I was able to do X, Y, and Z, but that doesn't always mean that you can easily get qualified for a loan, especially if you're someone who is an hourly employee or works a lot of overtime. Like those things by law have to be calculated differently than if you are a salaried W-2 employee. And I mean, even with self-employed people, they're like, well, I make this much money, 6 figures, I should be able to qualify. And that's just not always the case. And so there was just a lot of issues around that whole idea, because also everyone was buying a house, interest rates were low. And so that was kind of the thing to do. And so we ran into a lot of issues with, I know someone on the team had someone using Rocket Mortgage, and they got to like 2 days before closing, and then they told them like, oh yeah, you're not actually qualified. Like we can't do this loan.
Oh my gosh.
And again, like these are people's lives. Like they're moving from rentals, or they're moving from like other areas. Like they've spent money and time like going through this process in their mind. So that is really unfortunate, but I haven't had anything lately. I think again, like things have slowed down a bit, and buyers looking for more recommendations than anything.
Right, for sure. I agree. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the process in itself. You have like your final walkthroughs a couple days before closing to make sure the home is, all the repairs were done, everything kind of meets what the contract says. But what's after that?
So once you do the final walkthrough, typically you're going to meet your agent at the title company for closing. And ideally, you know, the day before, a couple days before, you're given the heads up of how much money you need to bring to closing.
Yes.
So I know that's what everyone is concerned about. You know, do I need to go to the bank and get a cashier's check? Do I need to wire this? You usually don't find out until a day or two before the actual closing date what your exact amount is.
Right.
So that's really what you can expect. And if you have any questions, obviously be talking with your agent. Let them know what your concerns are. But
Right.
I know for myself, it was like very nerve wracking to have to like coordinate going to the bank the morning of closing, getting the cashier's check, not having done that before in my life. I
Right.
barely have written any checks to begin with. But this is like a certified check from the bank that you sign, you bring to title. It's made out to the title company. And yeah, I mean, I typically tell my clients, like, just take that day off.
Yeah.
Whatever day it is, if you can, take the day off for closing because, you know, sign as early as you can and
Right.
then, like, go get lunch. Have you
Soak
like,
it in.
Yeah, soak it in, and then like once everybody else signs, you can come back and get the keys and
Right.
actually start moving in.
Yeah, I like that because trying to schedule it to where like you're stuck maybe working, you know, like taking an early lunch to sign documents, then going back to work and like just kind of waiting for something, you know.
Right.
Because obviously they don't like just hand them over right then and there, but yeah, I like that taking that time off. But I mean, after you get those keys, you know, pop a champagne, do something, you know, enjoy
Celebrate.
it a little bit, yes, and go take one more look at it, but this time it'll be yours, and it's a cool thing to watch and experience. So, but yeah.
I think that something that is very, very important for people to do is as soon as you close, we give our clients the paperwork for the homestead exemption for your property taxes. But the problem is you have to change the address on your driver's license first.
Yes.
For that to actually be something you can fill out and turn in. So like take that time that you have during your day off and like change your address on your driver's license. Start looking at the homestead exemption paperwork to turn that in because I was recently showing some houses with a client who they're renting now, but they moved here from another area.
Yeah.
Or moved back here from a different area. And she was like, yeah, like when we lived back there, like we never filed the homestead exemption. We really didn't know what we were doing. Like our agent didn't tell us. And especially the homestead exemption can save you hundreds of dollars a year, potentially thousands on your property taxes. So why wouldn't you do that for free?
Yes, free money saving.
Yeah. So anyways, that is kind of like the whole process leading up right to the end till you get keys. For us, we try to keep in contact with our clients, you know, kind of right afterwards to make sure if there's anything we can do, any recommendations we can make, you know,
Yes.
we can be there for you. But is there anything else you can think of?
No, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just to be understanding that there's gonna be some chaos, but lean into your realtor a little bit. You know, lean into him to take care of that situation for you. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like that's our responsibility to make sure everything is taken care of. And then yeah, I mean, don't neglect any of it. You know, because one day you'll look back and be like, man, like that was crazy, but like this this got us our home. You know, it's a very sentimental thing, and a lot of people do get emotional and. I think that's a very valid thing to be doing, you know. But yeah, it's a cool process to see, and I think that it is a lot, but it's all for a good reason.
Absolutely. And if you guys have any questions about what the home buying process looks like, whether you're a first-time home buyer or this is going to be your second, third, fourth, fifth plus home, we do have a free buyer's guide available on our website. That goes through the steps of what it looks like to buy a home, and we have other resources there that you're welcome to check out. You can also follow us down below on Instagram, and we would love it if you subscribe to our podcast and subscribe to us on YouTube and gave us a follow.
All right, we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. We hope you found something useful or at least had a good time listening.
Yeah, if you enjoy this episode, feel free to subscribe or share it with someone who might enjoy this content.
And if you have any questions or topics you want us to cover, reach out to us on Instagram. Everything will be linked below for you.